Hi, I'm Chef Tammy Brawley from the Green Kitchen. Welcome to Heart of the Home. Today I'm going to show you guys a delicious lasagna recipe. Not your typical lasagna with ricotta cheese and ground beef. We're going to do spinach and mushrooms. So we're going to get started on our saute pans over here. First we're going to start with some tomato sauce, and I really do recommend a San Marzano tomato. So we're going to put the tomatoes into a pan with a little bit of olive oil. And we're going to add some garlic to that, some chopped garlic. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat up just a bit. These are whole tomatoes, but they're going to break down as they cook. And then in our second pan that we have here, we have some olive oil warming up. Now your recipe is going to say something about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Well, what size pan are you using? If you've got a really big pan, you're certainly going to want more than 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I happen to have a very large pan. We're going to start with some onion on that. Some diced onion, and then we're going to add some sliced mushrooms to that. All right, so we're going to saute the mushrooms and the onions. We're going to let the tomatoes come to a boil. Once the mushrooms and the onions kind of soften up quite a bit, then we're going to move those to a bowl. And we're going to kind of season as we go. We've got some salt and pepper here. So our tomatoes are starting to come to a boil, but as I mentioned, they are whole, so you're going to want to break them down somewhat. I believe the recipe says crushed tomatoes. That's fine too if you want to buy them already crushed. And it's going to start thickening up a little bit, which is great. After it thickens, we're going to add some chopped basil. And believe it or not, I'm going to use the same tool to break down my mushrooms. I could have put them on the cutting board if I'd wanted to and break them down with a knife, but I find go right into the pan with it, use this blade. They don't have to be broken completely down into a fine mince, just somewhat smaller than what they already are. The tomatoes are already starting to thicken, which is very nice. Now, the recipe is also going to tell you to add a little water to your tomatoes to make more sauce. I just don't think it needs it. One is that canned tomatoes typically have a lot of water in them anyway, but it also is going to depend on the dish that you're making the lasagna in. Most lasagnas are done in your larger, almost 9 by 13, maybe even bigger than that. And in that case, if you've got a larger dish and you probably will want more sauce, in other words, so you would want to add that water. I always like to judge things, the oil in the pan, the dishes that we're using to bake in. That will determine the ingredients that go in. Today we're going to be using a smaller square lasagna dish, therefore we really don't need a watery base sauce. I'm going to add some chopped basil that I already have. And now I'm going to turn down my heat a little bit. The mushrooms are done. I'm going to move those to a bowl. And then I'm going to be sauteing the spinach. Now, if you find your skillet somewhat dry before you start sauteing the spinach, you can certainly add a little bit more oil if you would like. I see that it's somewhat moist, so I'm just going to toss in the spinach. And again, the recipe, I think, says to chop the spinach and take the stems off. If you've got a nice baby spinach, there's really no need to do the chopping or the taking the stems off, and mainly because it's going to really cook down. We're going to saute this off in batches. Does not take long. And we're going to be adding this to our mushrooms. We want to add a little salt. Spinach can always take salt. I'm going to add back in the spinach and the mushrooms in that large pan that we're using here. And our vegetables are ready for layering. I'm just going to kind of judge here. Yes, I definitely want a second layer of vegetables. And now we're going to do more sauce over top of those. And now we're going to do some cheese. We've got mozzarella cheese here. It's a heavier amount on the first layer. I think the recipe says maybe 3/4 of a cup or so, but we are dividing this recipe in half. And then we've got some grated Parmesan cheese. And this is your standard brand that you get in the grocery store, but you could certainly use shredded Parmesan if you'd like. Spread that over top. All right, and now we're going to come back with more noodles. We're going to go for more sauce now. Another layer, or our final layer, of our vegetables here. But if you guys have got kale or collards growing in your gardens, that's certainly another green you can use instead. Spread those vegetables out, and let's do some more cheese. A little bit more shredded parm, or grated parm, I should say. All right, we're going to finish off with 2 more no-boil noodles. Going to get the rest of our sauce on top of those. Top it off with the rest of the mozzarella cheese. I'm now going to come back with shredded Parmesan cheese. Now, a nice little trick that I love to do when it comes to anything you bake with foil on top, especially when it comes to cheese, is I love to use a nonstick spray on the foil. It helps keep it from sticking to the cheese when it bakes. So we're just going to kind of roughly spray that. And we're going to kind of loosely cover it to a certain extent. And we're keeping our dish on top of a sheet tray. That will help with spillage in your oven. And we have our oven preheated on 375. We're going to pop this into the oven for about 25 minutes. We're going to pull it out and remove the foil. Remember I said something about spraying the foil so it doesn't stick to the cheese? But now I do want a little bit more brown on the top. Back in the oven for 15 minutes. And this is what it should look like when it comes out of the oven after 15 minutes. In culinary school, I learned that you bake it until GBD, golden brown and delicious. So we're going to cut this and plate it on our plate. This with the vegetables is absolutely delicious. A lot more personality and certainly a lot healthier with the vegetables. Oh, it's gorgeous. Look at those layers. Spinach and mushrooms and that delicious tomato sauce. And there you have it, spinach and mushroom lasagna. I'm Chef Tammy with The Green Kitchen. Join us next time on Heart of the Home.